What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips ahead of Game Week 2. So this is a video series I do every game week throughout the season, discussing the most popular players that are being transferred in and out and talking about whether FPL managers are making a good or a bad decision. So if you want to see more of this throughout the season, make sure to hit that subscribe button and, of course, give the video a like if you enjoy it. I have made one addition to this series this year, which is adding a transfer watch table towards the end. So any of the players that we don't go into more detail about, I will still talk about them at the end of the video. A bit like the watch list table I did yesterday. Anyway, let's get into the first player, Harry Kane. We have to start with him. Over 600,000 transfers out already, and that's going to continue to go up ahead of the Game Week 2 deadline. He's also had a price drop to 11.4 million. So let's just discuss the main talking points. Was Kane a bad decision in Game Week 1? No, right? If I told you that Spurs were going to score 4 goals, which is kind of what I predicted anyway, I'm sure you would have liked to have had Kane or Son in your team. The fact that they came away with 1 assist between them is kind of crazy. That's not going to happen too often. They score that amount of goals, those two are usually going to be heavily involved. So it wasn't a bad choice. One of the themes throughout this video is going to be what has actually changed, right? For all those managers that are now going from Kane to Haaland, we knew that Haaland was going to score goals, right? He's gone into a Man City team where he is one of the best forwards in the league. So we knew that was going to happen. We also knew he had Bournemouth in Game Week 2 when we knew Kane had Chelsea. So yes, I do think that Haaland is the better pick this week. And I don't think anyone that's made that early move has made a bad choice. I probably would have done it myself. But in terms of having a good fixture in Game Week 2 and then having fairly good fixtures after that, they were all things we knew. Maybe for some of you, you just weren't expecting him to hit the ground running, to score goals in that team straight away. Maybe he had to get used to the league, etc. I know a lot of people are always concerned when a player comes into the Premier League, can they do it? And he has done it. So maybe that's why people made the transfer. So I think it's one of those situations where anyone that's holding on to Kane, I don't think necessarily is making a bad mistake, but I also don't think anyone that's done Kane to Haaland has made a mistake either. Sometimes it's kind of one or the other, but in this case, I think both strategies are okay. For any of you that have already eaten that price drop, and obviously Haaland's gone up to 11.6 million as well, I think unless you've got money in the bank, like if you saved yourself 0.5, 1 million, whatever it was when the season started, you don't now take a hit to make that transfer. I think you just kind of have to live with it, accept it's happened, and hope that this week it's Kane that scores in the harder fixture and Haaland maybe blanks in the easier fixture. For what it's worth, I don't think that's the way around it's going to happen, but that's what you've got to hope for, because essentially that's what happened in Game Week 1. In terms of how Kane did against Southampton, I had a look at the numbers. Son did outperform in terms of expected goals, expected assists, shots in the box, chances created, and all that stuff. That is just a one-game sample, so I don't think I'd be too worried about that kind of happening every single game week, but we did see a trend at the end of last season when Son was the one getting most of the goals and most of the assists. And realistically, he's not someone that just sticks to that left-hand side as a winger. He's always in, always central, and almost like the second striker to Kane. So it'll be interesting to see for those of us without Spurs players over the next few weeks if that trend continues. But I would still bank on Kane getting you decent points over the next few weeks. And arguably, we talked about this a lot, Kane could be a decent captain shout in Game Week 3, where Haaland's got Newcastle away, Salah's got Man United away, which to be fair looks like a great fixture, but Wolves at home on paper looks really nice as well. So you could double down. It could hurt as well, I get that. But Wolves, Forest and Fulham are not bad fixtures after that Chelsea game. But I get it. Right now it feels like you just want to get through to Game Week 3 because Haaland could do damage against Bournemouth. So yeah, just to summarise, Kane was not a bad pick to start the season. It's not a bad choice to have switched to Haaland. I also don't think it's a bad choice to keep hold of him. I know that sounds like fence sitting, but I think we can't judge too much off one game, and having 2 free transfers in Game Week 3 could be pretty handy. So on the flip side of that, we have to talk about Haaland. He's gone up to 11.6 million. It's only Tuesday and he's already had over 750,000 transfers in. And all that stuff I said about Kane, completely true, right? I don't think it's necessarily a mistake to hold on to him, to have those 2 free transfers for Game Week 3, but it's definitely not a mistake to have brought in Haaland, because Bournemouth at home looks like one of those games on paper where there's a lot of goals for Man City, and I would not be concerned about Bournemouth keeping a clean sheet in Game Week 1 at all, because Man City's attack is just so much better than Aston Villa. And the thing with Haaland is he adds another dimension to that Man City attack, which is already brilliant, in that if you try and play deep deep now, which a lot of teams do against Man City, they've got that target man. And we saw that when the ball went wide to Grealish, or Cancelo was sometimes there as well, and Foden on the right, that they were trying to find Haaland in the box with those crosses, and he nearly connected with one from Foden. I think it was in the first half. And if you don't sit deep and you try and come up the pitch a little bit, the guy is ridiculously fast, right? The acceleration and the way he times his runs is exceptional. And that second goal we saw where De Bruyne fed it through, we are going to see that goal so often this season from Man City. And it's what I was talking about in the Community Shield, where I don't think they tried that ball often enough. And Haaland times those runs so well, he's going to score plenty of goals. So you're kind of screwed whichever way you go. You go deep, they're going to cross balls in. You come out a bit, and Haaland is going to get past your defence because no one can keep up with him. So he looks like a really good option. I think if there's any downsides, he came off in like the 75th minute, but at that point it was already 2-0, so that probably had something to do with it. I'm sure between him and Kane, he is going to be managed more often. Kane, you're going to see starting every single game, and he's going to make it to 90 minutes quite often. With Haaland, that's probably not the case, but if Man City win, he's probably got some goals anyway, and I think up until Europe starts, there's not too much to worry about. So even after Bournemouth, Newcastle away, Palace at home, Nottingham Forest at home, these are all games that Man City are going to score goals in, and Haaland's going to be at the forefront of that. So he's in my team, really happy. If you want to go for him, just go for him. He's a brilliant option. Okay, so Matty Cash, the player's name who was in my comment section more than any other during pre-season, has blanked in game week 1, and now people are panicking about him a little bit. 125,000 transfers out already. My short answer is I probably wouldn't sell. You could maybe take price changes in case he possibly drops and another £5 million defender goes up, like Kyle Walker, for example. You could use that to justify the transfer, but ultimately I don't think it's worth using a transfer in game week 2. Not when he has Everton at home and Crystal Palace away. They are pretty good fixtures for any defender. We already knew he was a short-term pick, right? We could all see the fixtures before the season started. West Ham, Arsenal, Man City and Leicester are all teams that could score against Aston Villa, but I wouldn't be panicking when he has to play Everton and Palace in the next 2 games. I watched the highlights. I didn't watch the full game of Bournemouth versus Aston Villa. Villa weren't great, right? And obviously it was great for Bournemouth to get off to the win. But if you look at the stats, they only conceded 0.5 expected goals. And I'm not saying they were unlucky to concede or Bournemouth didn't deserve their goals. But if Aston Villa kept defending like that, they get a lot of clean sheets over the course of this season. So for me, it's too early to start knee-jerking to another £5 million defender. We already knew there was lots of good options. I don't think one is worth necessarily going for game week 2. Everton at home, Crystal Palace, definitely a chance of clean sheets in either of those games. And after that, that's when you want to start looking at possibly transferring him out, but not this week for me. So it's not that surprising that Gabriel Jesus has already been transferred out by over 233,000 FPL managers. He was so heavily owned going into game week 1 that as soon as he blanked, some were bound to knee-jerk, and they have. And there's lots of other forwards that have done well. Mitrovic, Wilson, Haaland, Nunez, just to name a few. So I kind of get why people have done it, but there's no way I'm going to be selling him ahead of Leicester at home, Bournemouth away and Fulham at home. Crystal Palace was arguably their hardest fixture from the first 4. Arsenal did well in the first half, bit more difficult maybe in the second half, but goals and assists are going to come for Jesus. His personal stats were not that great in that first game. 0.14 expected goals per 90, 0 expected assists per 90. But if you watch the game, on another day, he would have come away with 1 to 2 assists. We want to see the goals, of course, but again, it probably was their most difficult fixture. So I think that extra free transfer in game week 3 is way more valuable than knee-jerking on Jesus this early. And I think generally when you bring in a player at most points during the season, you want to give them like 4 to 6 games. That's what you're kind of looking at when you make these transfers. So it just seems completely wrong to take out a player before they play 2 newly promoted sides. And look, maybe at some point during the season we'll decide that Saka and Diaz and Kulusevski and Foden, whichever £8 million midfielders it is, are all better than Jesus, and perhaps we move that spot from the forward line to the midfield line instead. But it's way too early to decide on that. He is someone that's going to get regular minutes, regular starts, and he's going to get goals, right? I just don't see how that doesn't happen. The fixtures are too good. I just don't think you can sell him this early. Okay, let's talk about Perisic and ultimately try and answer the question, should FPL managers that own him look to sell or hold on to him? I don't think anyone should be buying. Chelsea away is not a great fixture, and there's no guarantee that he will start. And that is the tricky position that owners are in. There's no guarantee that he will start. Part of the problem is Sessegnon played really well against Southampton. He might get a chance to play again against Chelsea. He'd already improved under Conte. We saw that at the end of last season. And the fact that he played well in the first game might mean that Conte gives Perisic a little bit more time to get up to full fitness before he starts him. I think we're going to have to wait and see what Conte says, because in his press conference last week and in an interview as well, he mentioned that Perisic wasn't at 100%. It's not the Perisic that he knew. Obviously, the only way to get that fitness up is to get minutes in matches, which we saw him come off the subs bench. But it obviously doesn't mean that he's definitely going to start. And Conte did also talk about how the new players need to learn how the team plays and stuff like that. So I think if I was a Perisic owner, I've been willing to risk it in game week 1. I'd probably risk it in game week 2 as well and just hope that he gets a start. And if he does, Wolves, Forest and Fulham look really good in the next 4. The problem is you could fall into a bit of a trap where if Sessegnon plays well again against Chelsea, you've then got this same conundrum against Wolves at home, and it gets harder and harder to sell him because he's got better and better fixtures. So let's wait and see what Conte says. That's not me trying to get out of answering the question, but I do think it will be important. If he says something like, Perisic is back to where he should be now, the new players have had time to learn and adjust, maybe that gives us a better indication of whether he's going to start. If it's similar to last week, though, I wouldn't put it past him starting Sessegnon again. Okay, so just to cover off some of the other players, we've got this transfer watch table which shows you the top 5 in and out in each position so far this week. We're not going to include goalkeepers because most people don't transfer them out week in, week out. And I'm not going to go through every single player, but it gives you an idea of what the community are doing in terms of their transfers. Zinchenko was the most popular transfer in so far for defenders. I really wish we'd seen Tierney from the start, like be in the first 11, and then knew that Zinchenko was definitely going to play in midfield. I think most people are pretty confident that he's going to have a place in that starting 11 most weeks anyway. I just wish we'd seen that, but I can't begrudge anyone that's brought him in. He looked really good. Saliba could be an option at 4.5 million instead. Again, I'd really like to see Tomiyasu play and then see who lines up as the centre-backs in the first game. But Saliba was really good, so he's given Arteta a decision to make there. He may well keep his place, and for 0.6 million less than Zinchenko, that could be a decent price. I don't think I'd go for either of the Newcastle players. They've got to play Liverpool and Man City over the next 4. And I also don't understand why Trent and James are being sold so heavily. I would definitely keep them if you own them. I'd be looking to buy them, not looking to sell them. Cucurella, look, bad pick from me probably. If he starts against Spurs, maybe people will start looking at him as a 5 million option from game week 3 onwards. But I get why people are selling him this week, because like Perisic, there's no guarantee that he will start. With midfielders, Salah obviously in there. Martinelli still a really good pick. Kulusevski looked decent as well. I wouldn't knee-jerk on your £8 million midfielders because Kulusevski's got to play Chelsea. But again, I can see why people are going for him. Hopefully Richarlison doesn't take too many minutes off that front 3. In terms of the transfers out, I don't think you need to knee-jerk on Son too much right now. Same with Diaz. I get why the likes of Rashford and Coutinho are being sold, but I'd like to give them at least one more game, like I would for most players. I've already spoken about Darwin Núñez and Jesus last week. Greenwood and Jesus are both in the top 5 transfers in and out, which is interesting. I think for your 4.5 million forwards, just don't change them that much. Haaland, of course, the most popular in. Mitrovic is someone we didn't mention. He's had nearly 400,000 transfers in. I like him, but the fixtures are just not great. I think it's Wolves and Brentford, which are okay, but then they get really difficult again. I know he did really well against Liverpool, but I'm not sure that is going to be repeated against all those kind of top 6 sides. So I don't think you need to rush to bring him in. If it was to free up cash for another move, fair enough, but I wouldn't be personally rushing out to bring him in just because of the fixtures. So yeah, lots of transfers in and out. Let me know who you think is worth bringing in and who you've already transferred out in the comments below. If you have enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Plenty more content to come this week, and I'll have my team selection video out tomorrow.